All right, welcome back to Chapters Unfolded. If you're just joining us now, you've kind of stumbled upon something special, really. We're in the middle of a journey, you could say. It's our Hyperfocus series. This is actually our third deep dive now. And the whole mission here at Chapters Unfolded is, well, it's simple, but it's powerful. We really meticulously explore these self-development books.
Chapter by chapter.
Chapter by chapter, yeah. To extract those really valuable insights for you. We like to think of ourselves as, your guide through this sometimes overwhelming world of self-improvement. And we're not just skimming the surface here.
No, no, no.
We're diving deep, so you don't have to. We bring you those key takeaways in a way that's, I think, engaging.
A little suspenseful.
Yeah, maybe even a little suspenseful, right?
Yeah.
As we reveal these little hidden gems of knowledge. But always confident they'll walk away with some real knowledge. So if you're ready to unlock your potential, stick with us. And definitely consider subscribing so you don't miss any of these future deep dives as we unfold more chapters.
That's right. And today we are continuing our exploration of Chris Bailey's Hyperfocus, specifically diving into Chapter 2, titled The Limits of Your Attention. And, you shared this book with us, and you were really eager to understand how to better manage your focus in a world that is constantly demanding it, This chapter is foundational. It reveals some surprising truths about the very nature of our attention.
Oh, yeah?
And its constraints. So get ready for some aha moments as we unpack the science behind what you can, and just as importantly, what you cannot focus on.
Absolutely. And the fundamental question we're tackling today is, what are the actual limits of your attention?
Right.
And how do these limits impact our ability to learn, to work, and even to remember? We'll be looking at some surprising numbers, some really, kind of eye-opening numbers, and explore what they actually mean for you in your daily life.
I think this is something that we all kind of intuitively know. We know that we can only focus on so many things at once, but I think when we actually dig into the science behind it, that's when the real aha moments come.
Yeah. It turns out that our attention is not this limitless resource.
No.
That we sometimes treat it as or would like to believe it is. There's some real constraints, some real limits on what we can focus on.
Yeah, and the very first sentence of the chapter, I think, sets the stage so beautifully. William James said, "Without selective interest, experience is utter chaos."
Ooh.
Right. And then, in a slightly more modern take, Qui-Gon Jinn's words also resonate. Your focus determines your reality. So this really sets the stage for why this chapter is so crucial. And Bailey highlights two primary constraints on our ability to focus our attention.
Okay, all right. Lay it on us.
Yeah.
What are these two limitations we need to be aware of?
Well, firstly, there's a limit to the number of things that you can focus on at any single moment. And secondly, there's a limit to how much information you can hold in your short-term memory after you focus. So both of these limitations have really significant implications for how we navigate our day.
It's almost unsettling to consider, really. I mean, we constantly feel like we're juggling so much mentally, like we're giving our attention to multiple things simultaneously. But it seems like the reality is quite different.
It really is. It really is. So just think about the sheer flood of sensory information that's bombarding you right now. I mean, sights, sounds, smells, even just the feeling of your clothes on your skin.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So psychology professor Timothy Wilson estimates that your brain receives an estimated 11 million bits of sensory information.
11 million.
Every single second.
Every second. Wow. That's just staggering. I mean, 11 million bits per second.
It is. It's absolutely staggering. And here's where it gets really interesting. Out of that 11 million bits, you can consciously process and focus on only about 40.
40 out of 11 million. That feels incredibly restrictive. It's like trying to, trying to take a meaningful sip from a fire hose.
It is.
It's almost impossible.
Yeah. And Bailey uses that very analogy, sipping from a fire hose, which perfectly illustrates this incredible selectivity that our attention demands. So consider something as commonplace as a simple conversation. Renowned psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi suggests that merely decoding a conversation, so interpreting the words being spoken and their meaning, consumes over half of those precious attentional bits.
That makes total sense, actually, when you think about it. I mean, you can't really have two meaningful conversations at the same time, can you? Like, you may hear the words from both, but genuinely engaging and understanding both, it feels cognitively impossible.
Absolutely, absolutely. So your brain is working really hard in that moment to interpret the speaker's words, their tone of voice, their intention, their underlying intention, and there's very little attentional bandwidth left over for anything else.
Yeah.
That requires significant mental processing. So it really highlights how much focused effort even these seemingly simple interactions demand.
Okay, so a very limited number of things we can focus on at any one time.
Yeah.
But you also mentioned a second really crucial constraint, and that is the limitations of our short-term memory.
Yes.
So tell me, what's the story there? I mean, so even if we manage to really focus on something, it's not like we can just immediately hold on to endless amounts of new information about it.
No, we can't. Right. So beyond this immediate bottleneck of what you can actively focus on, there's a limit to how much information you can hold in your short-term memory after you've directed your attention to it. So think of short-term memory as this temporary mental scratch pad. It's crucial for our thinking, our planning, and for solving problems in the moment.
Okay. So the capacity of this temporary scratch pad, I mean, how big are we talking?
It's surprisingly small.
Really?
There's this well-established concept known as the magic number 4. On average, you can only hold about 4 unique chunks of information in your short-term memory. So this constraint highlights a crucial insight for learning. Break down complex information into smaller chunks to improve retention. Think key bullet points or concise summaries, those kinds of things.
The magic number 4. I mean, that sounds almost arbitrary. I mean, is there solid evidence to back this up?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Bailey provides a very simple but really effective demonstration in the book. Try to memorize this list of 10 names: Arden, Rick, Ryan, Lucinda, Louise, Martin, Kelsey, Sanisa, Dwight, Bryce. So when people try to recall these names immediately afterwards, the average number of names they can remember is, you guessed it, around 4.
I'm already feeling my mental capacity being stretched just hearing those names.
Yeah.
Just trying to keep them all in my head at once.
That's right. And what's particularly fascinating here is this concept of chunking. So if you can effectively group pieces of information together based on meaning or some kind of association,
Okay.
you can actually bypass this limitation to some extent, and you can actually process things more deeply.
Interesting.
So Bailey shares this great personal example. He could remember all 10 of those names, and this was because they happened to be the people that he had emailed most recently.
Yeah.
So he was able to create this automatic and meaningful connection between those names.
So it's almost like, remembering a phone number more easily as 3 or 4 smaller groups of digits.
Exactly.
Rather than trying to recall one long, unbroken string of numbers.
Absolutely. And you actually see evidence of this magic number principle all around you. Think about pairs.
Pairs, yeah.
Right. The power of 3 in storytelling.
Sure.
Olympic medal ceremonies. Groups of 4, like the seasons.
Yeah.
5 love languages.
The 5 love language.
That's 6 sides of a die.
Right.
The 7 days of the week.
7 wonders of the world.
Or the 7 wonders of the world, right.
Yeah.
Even phone numbers are often structured to fit within these natural cognitive limits.
It's almost as if our world has subconsciously adapted itself to the limitations of our minds.
It really is. It really is. It's fascinating.
So we've got these 2 fundamental limitations.
Yeah.
This is incredibly narrow focus, and then this surprisingly small short-term memory. How do those 2 things interact, and how do they shape our daily experiences?
Yeah, that's where this idea of attentional space, I think, is so helpful.
Okay.
So Bailey introduces this term as the mental capacity we have available to actively focus on and process things in any given moment. So think of it as this temporary scratch pad or a clipboard in your brain where the active processing is happening.
Okay. So attentional space, it's essentially where all the active thinking, the processing is taking place.
Exactly.
In that very moment.
Yes. It's what you are consciously aware of at any given time. And your attentional space allows you to hold information, manipulate it, and to connect it with other pieces of information simultaneously, at least for a short period.
Right.
So when you focus on something, it occupies this space in your short-term memory where it's kept active for processing. And Bailey uses this really helpful computer analogy. If your brain were a computer, your attentional space would be akin to its RAM. Right? Or, what researchers technically refer to as working memory, right? It's the mental workspace where you actively hold and manipulate information.
Okay. So everything we're actively thinking about, whether it's a specific task that we're trying to complete, a conversation we're engaged in, even just a a daydream that's kind of flitting through our minds.
Yeah.
It's taking up valuable real estate in this attentional space.
Exactly, it is. It's your entire conscious world in that very moment. And I think reading is a fantastic example of just how much of this attentional space, even a single seemingly simple activity can consume.
Yeah.
If you're truly and deeply focused on the text in front of you, there's very little attentional space left available for anything else. It's very similar to why you can't text and drive safely. Each of those tasks demands too much of your attentional resources
Oh, absolutely.
to really fit comfortably together.
Yeah, and when I'm really engrossed in a good book, the entire outside world seems to just fade away into this background hum.
Exactly. So consider the complex process of reading itself.
Yeah.
Your brain is working really, really hard, even if it doesn't feel like effort. It's registering the light waves hitting your eyes, generating the words from those visual patterns, forming syntactic units and clauses, and then finally grouping those individual words into complete ideas to extract meaning from them.
It's almost like building with mental Lego bricks.
Yeah.
Starting with all these individual pieces and then slowly assembling them into these larger, more complex structures of understanding.
Exactly. And even these subtle aspects of language, like sentence structure and punctuation, play a role in how we process information.
Interesting.
So Bailey mentions a study that suggests that the period at the end of a sentence acts as this natural pause.
Okay.
It allows your attentional space to stop being loaded momentarily, and it allows the information you've just processed to be summarized in your short-term memory.
Fascinating. It's almost as if the very way that we write and read has evolved to work in harmony with these fundamental limitations that we have.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
It really is. And it gets even more subtle. So your attention is so deeply intertwined with what you're doing that even involuntary actions like blinking tend to naturally synchronize with these natural breaks in your focus.
Okay.
So like the end of a sentence that you're reading or when a speaker pauses in their speech.
Wow. Our brains are constantly optimizing for how we take in information, right down to something as automatic as when we blink our eyes.
It's amazing. It really is.
So if our attentional space is this limited, but it's constantly being filled with information, how do we even begin to take control of it?
Right.
How do we manage it effectively?
That's where the concept of meta-awareness comes in.
Okay.
So it's essentially the act of consciously checking in with yourself and asking, what is occupying my attentional space right now?
Right.
What's on my mind at this very moment?
Yeah.
So becoming aware of what you're thinking about is a fundamental practice for learning how to manage your attention effectively.
It sounds straightforward, but I think it's something that we very rarely do consciously throughout the day. We tend to just get swept along by whatever we're doing or whatever thoughts happen to be popping into our heads.
Yeah, we're not very mindful of our attention.
Right.
So studies show that our minds actually wander a surprising amount of the time. Some estimates put it as high as 47% of our waking hours.
47%. Wow.
Right. So you're often lost in thought about the past, about things that have already happened, or about the future, about things that might happen, rather than being fully present in the current moment. And this is where the concept of mindfulness comes in. It's about noticing your thoughts, your feelings, and your perceptions without judgment.
So it's not about trying to stop those thoughts from arising altogether, but just about noticing them when they do.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that not all thoughts are necessarily true.
Right.
And certainly not all of them warrant our serious attention. And David Kane has this great quote that Bailey includes in the book. He says, all thoughts want to be taken seriously, but few warrant it.
It's a powerful reminder. We so often get completely caught up in our own internal mental monologue.
Absolutely. And here's a surprising benefit of noticing when your mind wanders away from a task. So studies show that this act of meta-awareness can actually lead to better performance on certain tasks. So for example, one study found that readers who were aware that their minds had wandered while they were reading a detective novel were actually more likely to correctly solve the mystery at the end.
That's interesting because you would naturally assume that mind wandering would only hinder performance. But it sounds like the very act of becoming aware that your attention has drifted brings some level of processing back to that original task.
Exactly. It's almost like that recognition is a cue to bring your attention back.
Right. And it's important to remember that the content of our attentional space is constantly in flux. Thoughts, tasks, conversations, sensory inputs. I mean, they're continually passing through, often without us even consciously registering them. I mean, the content itself is really quite ephemeral,
Yeah.
with a memory span that averages just around 10 seconds. And even more interesting, our mood can actually have an effect on the size of our attentional space.
It's really fascinating how dynamic our attention is.
Yeah. So there are certain types of tasks, I'm assuming, that just don't work well together
Yeah,
within this limited attentional space. I
right.
mean, like trying to have a deep and meaningful conversation
Right.
while simultaneously trying to, solve a complex problem at work. Those two things just, they don't jive.
Exactly, exactly. So different tasks require varying amounts of our attentional space,
Okay.
depending on their inherent complexity. So a truly meaningful conversation
Yeah.
can very easily fill your attentional space completely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's important to make a distinction here between habits, which require very minimal attentional space once they're initiated, and these complex tasks that demand our dedicated, focused attention.
Okay. So for those complex tasks, then multitasking is generally not going to be an effective strategy.
For the most part, that's absolutely correct. However, you can actually multitask surprisingly effectively when it comes to habits.
Okay.
So think about activities like walking and listening to an audiobook, or
Mhm.
perhaps, doing laundry while you're talking on the phone with a friend. These kinds of tasks often engage different senses,
Okay.
which reduces competition for our mental resources.
So if one task is primarily auditory and another task is more motor or visual, they're less likely to interfere with each other.
Absolutely. Bailey actually talks about his weekly ritual in the book. He intentionally combines rote maintenance tasks like meal preparation or cleaning his home
Hmm.
with listening to engaging podcasts or audiobooks.
Yeah, that's a great way to use that time effectively.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even, just using your commute time
Yeah.
to listen to audiobooks. That's a
Yeah.
great example of this principle in action.
Absolutely. So it's about being strategic, I guess, and thoughtful about what we try to accomplish simultaneously.
Yes.
We want to try to pair those more complex tasks with
Yeah.
activities that are really truly automatic for us.
That are habitual, yeah. And
Right.
and cognitive neuroscientist Stanislas Dehaene, he explains that, habits become automatic
Right.
after you initiate them.
Yeah.
They're driven by sequence-related activity in the basal ganglia. And so this automation actually frees up your prefrontal cortex,
Okay.
which is your brain's logic and thinking center, to
Right.
focus on other more demanding tasks.
Interesting. Okay, so we've got this idea that we can pair a complex task with a habit, maybe do a few small habitual tasks together.
Yeah.
But where does this all tend to break down? When does attempting to multitask become truly ineffective and really leads to
Yeah.
attention overload?
Right. And Bailey actually outlines 3 general combinations of tasks that tend to fit within the confines of our attentional space.
Okay.
So firstly, engaging in a few small habitual tasks simultaneously, like perhaps breathing, going for a run, listening to familiar music.
Okay.
Secondly, you can pair a task that requires the majority of your focus with one other highly habitual task. So listening to a podcast while you're doing chores, that kind of thing. And then finally, the most productive state is often just dedicating your entire attentional space to one complex task.
Right.
So the crucial thing to remember in those first 2 scenarios is to avoid overfilling
Okay.
any spare attentional capacity that you might have.
Yeah, so when we try to cram too much in, what are some of the telltale signs? What are some of the negative consequences of experiencing this attention overload? I mean, how does it manifest in our daily lives?
It can be really noticeable, actually. So, for example, have you ever walked into a room with a specific purpose in mind and then completely forgotten why you went in there in the first place?
Oh, all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so frustrating, and it's a little embarrassing sometimes,
Yeah.
even though I know it's a common experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, it happens all the time.
Right. So that's very often a sign of attention overload. You are trying to hold too many different things in your mind
Right?
at the same time, and your original intention simply got lost in the clutter.
Right. Yeah. It's like there was no room for it to stick.
Exactly. And it happens because your attentional space becomes filled with this background noise, random fleeting thoughts, or other minor distractions, and there's no room for your original intention to remain active. It's very similar to, you're driving home from work, you're really preoccupied with thinking about this work problem,
Hmm.
and then you completely forget to stop at the grocery store to pick up the items that you plan to buy.
Oh yeah. That's me every night.
Yeah.
So working with intention, I mean, that's key to avoiding this kind of mental overload.
It's absolutely crucial. So intention allows you to be more selective.
Yeah.
Prioritize what you allow to occupy this precious attentional space.
Right.
So when you approach your tasks with intention,
Mm-hmm.
you're less likely to overfill your attentional space.
Yeah.
And this often leads to a greater feeling of calmness and control.
Go.
So ideally, at any given moment, your attentional space should hold at most two key things.
Okay.
Okay. Your intention and what you're currently doing.
Okay.
So being constantly mindful of your intentions helps ensure that you remain immersed
Right.
in what you aim to accomplish.
It's like having this mental compass that's guiding you back towards what's important.
Exactly. And you see examples of this all around you,
Yeah.
trying to care for a toddler while navigating a shopping mall, attempting to walk down a crowded street while texting on your phone, zoning out completely while consuming media, making mistakes while following a recipe, overeating without really registering what you're doing, forgetting to complete these small routine tasks that you intended to do.
It really highlights just how important it is to be conscious of what we're allowing to occupy this precious mental space.
Absolutely. And simplifying the content of your attentional space allows for more intentional living and focusing on what truly matters to you. So as Bailey puts it, the state of your attentional space has a very direct impact on your general feeling of being overwhelmed or clear and in control. And there's this natural tendency that works against us.
Okay.
It's called novelty bias.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Our seemingly built-in attraction to anything new and shiny.
That's right. And your prefrontal cortex actually rewards you with this little hit of dopamine when you switch between tasks. So this creates this natural urge to constantly seek out these new stimuli, whether it's checking email while you're trying to work on a report, reaching for your phone while you're watching a movie, or just generally keeping your phone nearby and within easy reach.
And this constant task, switching and seeking novelty, creates this illusion of productivity. It makes us feel busy, but it doesn't necessarily lead to meaningful accomplishments.
So our brains are almost fundamentally wired to be distractible. I mean, it's part of how we're built.
It's part of our evolutionary heritage, I guess you could say. So Bailey points out that the human brain wasn't built to do knowledge work as we understand it today.
Right.
Its fundamental wiring is geared towards survival and reproduction.
Right.
So historically, seeking out food sources or constantly scanning the environment for threats,
Right.
that provided survival advantages.
Yeah.
And the dopamine reward system evolved to reinforce those behaviors.
Okay.
But today, our electronics provide this constant stream of novel stimulation that very easily overshadows more productive and meaningful activities.
It almost feels like we have to work against our own brains in some ways. In some ways, yes. Yes. And I think this is where, redefining what we mean by productivity is so important. It's not about being busy all the time.
Right.
It's about accomplishing what we intend to.
Right. Okay.
So Bailey actually offers this really helpful definition. Productivity, at its core, means accomplishing what we intend to accomplish.
Okay.
Whether that intention is to complete a focused work task,
Right.
or to intentionally engage in a period of relaxation and rest.
Sure.
So it's not about being busy.
Right.
It's about doing the right thing in each moment.
Okay. That's a really important distinction. So all this shifting and overloading of our attention, it has real costs that go beyond just feeling overwhelmed.
Absolutely.
There's more to it than that.
Yeah. So while some degree of attention shifting is necessary, engaging in too much of it can be detrimental in several ways.
Right.
So one significant cost is the impact on your memory. Okay. So studies have shown that we recall significantly less information when we're actively multitasking with digital devices. And the constant presence of technology can also subtly speed up our perception of time,
Right.
which tempts us to fill every spare moment with more stimulation, ultimately leading to less encoding of memories. So paying attention is crucial for forming those lasting memories.
So those moments when our attention is divided, I guess they're less likely to become memories that we can really vividly recall later on.
Exactly. And when you multitask, you actually process information differently in your brain.
Really?
So Bailey cites research that shows that when you're trying to learn new information while multitasking,
Hmm.
your brain relies more heavily on the basal ganglia, which is the part of your brain involved in skills and habits,
Right.
rather than the hippocampus, which plays this crucial role in storing and recalling new information.
Hmm. So it's almost like we're developing this superficial familiarity with something,
Exactly.
but not a really deep, lasting understanding that truly sticks with us.
Absolutely, yeah. And this constant shifting of our attention also undermines our productivity.
In what ways?
So it leads to longer task switching times.
Okay.
That mental lag as you reorient yourself to a new task, it reduces our ability to filter out irrelevant information and distractions, and it makes it harder to resist that impulsive urge to switch to another task. And just to give you a really stark illustration of this,
Yeah.
on average, we work for only about 40 seconds
46?
on a computer before we're interrupted by a notification
Wow.
or we self-distract.
That's barely enough time to get into any kind of flow state at all.
It's amazing, isn't it? It really highlights how fractured our attention spans have become.
Yeah.
And there's also this really important concept of attention residue,
Okay.
which was coined by Sophie Leroy.
Okay.
And it describes how fragments of our thoughts and focus from the previous task
Yeah.
linger in our attentional space even after we've switched. Right. Hindering our ability to fully concentrate. So it's like these mental tabs that are still slightly open, consuming valuable cognitive resources.
Oh, yeah. That feeling of still thinking about the last thing you were doing, even though you've consciously moved on to something new.
Absolutely. And this attention residue involves this continuation of evaluating the previous task or just general rumination about it. And research suggests that switching between tasks tends to be easier after you've completed a task.
Okay.
Especially if there was a deadline involved,
Right.
because that provides a sense of closure.
Okay. Yeah.
So without those clear endpoints, our brain may not achieve this completion, making it harder to switch our focus. And the productivity cost of task switching is huge. One study found that continuous task switching can make work take as much as 50% longer to complete compared to doing those same tasks sequentially.
50%. That's a huge difference.
It really is. It's huge.
I mean, that's a massive hit to our efficiency.
Absolutely. And this is why taking breaks after completing big tasks is so important. It allows that attention residue to dissipate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it really all comes down to, I guess, the quality of our attention in any given moment.
It does.
How do we actively work to improve that quality?
So I think intention acts as this bouncer for our attentional space,
Okay.
right? It allows productive focus in
Yeah.
and keeps distractions out. So learning to focus with intention is one of the most impactful things you can do to improve your quality of life.
Okay.
Now, perfect focus is not always possible,
Right.
but maintaining it for a significant portion of your day will lead to greater accomplishment and effectiveness.
So it's about being deliberate and conscious about where we choose to direct our mental energy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the benefits of intentional attention, I mean, they're numerous and they're far-reaching. So you'll find yourself accomplishing your intentions more often. You'll experience deeper focus. Your memory will likely improve. You'll feel less plagued by guilt and self-doubt. You'll waste less time on distractions.
Right.
You'll experience greater mental clarity and a reduction in stress.
Wow.
You'll develop this stronger sense of purpose, and your relationships can even deepen.
So it's really about, it's not just about getting things done. It's about living a more engaged and fulfilling life.
That's exactly what it is.
Wow.
Yeah. And Bailey suggests 3 really practical measures that you can use to track your attention.
Okay.
Okay. So firstly, how much of your total time are you actually spending intentionally?